Hi, I'm Gita, and this is Answer the Question. Last week I read the party platforms for the first time ever, actually. And if you've never read the actual published platforms of each party, smart choice. They are terribly written. I mean, they're practically unreadable. There's nothing very substantive about them. They're just a bunch of campaign slogans with a vague set of actions outlined to describe how each big goal is going to get done. But nevertheless, I took a look at them to see if there is any goals we have in common as a nation, and as a matter of fact, there is. The first document I looked at was Donald Trump's Agenda 47 platform. And this is available on his website, www.donaldjtrump.com. I won't read the whole thing to you, but he lays out 20 priorities for his second term as president. And they range from very specific things like large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips, to very broad things like uniting our country by bringing it to unprecedented levels of success. The Republican Party as a whole seems to have just adopted Donald Trump's Agenda 47, but they boiled it down to 10 key goals from the original 20, and it took them 28 pages to describe those goals. They're very similar, though. The Democratic Party also has a published platform, and it has the fewest goals of all, 9 key goals to be specific, but it took them an agonizing 90 plus pages to describe them. Obviously, since Republicans control the presidency and both branches of Congress, a lot of Democratic priorities are going to fall by the wayside. Gun control, environmental protections, and DEI are all pretty much dead in the water. However, there are still 45 Democratic senators out of 100 total senators, and 215 Democrats in the House of Representatives out of 435 total. So, they expect to represent their constituents who voted for them. Also, 75,019,230 people voted for Kamala Harris versus the 77,303,568 that voted for Trump. So that's 48.34% to 49.81%. That means there's a whole lot of people out there expecting their elected officials, even if it's not the president, to be working on their behalf while they're in Congress. And the easiest way for Democrats to deliver something that their constituents want is to work with Republicans wherever there are shared priorities. So of the 10 shared priorities, inflation is really near the top for both parties. Both Republicans and Democrats and Donald Trump specifically listed bringing down inflation as one of their top goals. Now, Republicans had a list of actions that probably won't bring down inflation quickly, and some don't seem to relate to inflation at all. For example, they want to unleash American energy, rein in wasteful federal spending, cut costly and burdensome regulations, stop illegal immigration, and restore peace through strength, because geopolitical stability brings price stability. Now, those are not quick fixes, but they should eventually help inflation. Democrats also talked pretty extensively about inflation. They took much more of a kitchen sink approach. They talked specifically about the cost of healthcare, prescription drugs, gas and groceries, housing, and what's come to be known as greedflation, which is excessive corporate profit taking. They also threw in childcare, home care, paid leave, education, Social Security, pensions, Medicare, which they don't draw any clear connection to, from inflation to those items. But at a minimum, inflation is an agreed upon priority, and that is something we could measure. Consumer Price Index and Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE, are 2 good measures of inflation. So it's possible for us to create a report card and see what's the baseline, and then how does that change, so we can see if our government is actually working for us. The second shared priority is one that's in the news a lot these days, which is immigration. The Democratic focus on immigration was securing the border and expanding legal immigration while deterring illegal immigration. The Republicans had a longer list of goals here. They want to secure the border, enforce immigration laws, begin the largest deportation program in American history. They want strict vetting of foreigners based on ideology. They want to stop sanctuary cities, prioritize merit-based immigration, and end chain migration. Donald Trump also had a lot to say about immigration, but it all boils down to the same sort of measurable goals, which are removals of people with and without criminal histories, border encounters reported by the Department of Homeland Security, and then employment visas granted. Both parties acknowledge that there are some cases where we need to import workers from other places, and there are special categories of visas for that. The economy was a third shared priority. It was top of mind for both Republicans and Democrats, although, as you would expect, their approaches to strengthening the economy were quite different. Now, interestingly, nobody mentioned the national debt or the budget deficit. So I went ahead and added those as metrics that we could measure to see if our government's working for us. And then I also added metrics around the things that they did stress. For example, the GDP per capita, and stock market indexes are a good measure of growth, and also the unemployment rate and household wealth by percentile give us a good indication of whether everybody's benefiting from a good economy or whether a few people are benefiting from an improving economy. Affordability was a rare moment of pretty close bipartisan agreement across party lines, with both platforms promising to make housing, education, and healthcare more affordable. So we can measure those things by looking at the housing affordability index, the average total cost of a four-year college degree, and healthcare spending per capita. The trade deficit was a third area of agreement. The Republican agenda has a party platform that really focused on it, promising to rebalance trade, secure strategic independence from China, save the American auto industry, bring home critical supply chains, buy American and hire American, which means limiting outsourcing. And the Democrats agreed to some extent with this, with their main area of overlap being the importance of bringing manufacturing home and bringing the supply chain home for key industries such as semiconductors. So this can be measured by trade deficit, the job growth, and manufacturing job growth specifically. Taking care of older adults or senior citizens was the next shared priority. And the cynic in me wants to say that the evidence of baby boomers as a key voting bloc is clear in this focus in the party platforms. But I'm going to try and suspend my cynicism and say that both parties seemed very concerned with the health and welfare of older adults, pledging to protect Social Security and pensions. In terms of measuring whether that they are actually doing that, I may still find some other measures, but I thought we could at least start with the poverty rate for people who are 65 and older, as well as the food insecurity rate for people over the age of 65. Education is another shared priority, but most of what both platforms said about education had nothing to do with actual learning. The Democrats focused on infrastructure and cost, and the Republicans focused on teacher and principal quality, school choice, school safety, what I'm going to call fighting wokeism in schools, promoting national pride, freedom to pray, and closing the Department of Education to return control of education back to the states. Trump said a lot about education, railing against critical race theory, gender ideology, inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content, and most of what was said in both platforms is going to be very difficult to measure. So this is one area where I think if we're going to make a report card, I'm going to have to make some assumptions about what's important. I'm also a parent, so I'm going to assume that most people want the same thing as I wanted when I sent my kids to school, which is for them to learn academic subjects so that they can be successful later in life and get good jobs. So I am adding PISA scores, which measure mathematical ability, literacy scores, which measure the ability to read, and high school graduation rates to the report card. There was a strong focus on safety and freedom of expression and school choice in the Republican platform. So I went ahead and also added school shootings, bullying, and high school graduation rate, which, I think is reflective of both environment and learning, to put together the education report card. This next bucket I called American Pride, but that's a little bit of a catch-all. What the GOP platform actually says is bring common sense to our government and renew the pillars of American civilization. But when you read through what all the platforms are saying, it's a little bit of a smorgasbord. Since both the Republican and Democratic platforms specifically mention homelessness among veterans, I went ahead and added that and homelessness in general to this report card. Crime rates, both violent and nonviolent, seemed like an obvious add. Religious identity as a response to calls within the platforms for freedom of religion and freedom to worship. And then also incidents of hate crimes, which is called out pretty specifically in the Republican platform. The ninth thing that both parties seem to agree upon is what I'm going to call strengthening democracy. A lot of what both parties said about our democracy is difficult to measure, or it's not universally agreed upon. But what both parties did stress is the importance of free and fair elections. So the measures that I think we could use for our report card on our government are voter turnout. There is a free and fair elections index, which compares the openness and fairness of elections globally. And there's a freedom of the press index as well. I don't know how well regarded either of those two indexes are, so I also added public trust in the government. And the final common goal is what I'm calling world peace, for lack of a better term. I don't know what else to call it. They specifically reference peace, but they talk specifically about military funding and military technologies. So I don't really know how to measure it. I think we could probably say we're going to measure their success or their advances in world peace by looking at foreign aid by category of aid, whether it's humanitarian aid or military aid. We can look at the Global Peace Index, and we can also look at global and domestic perceptions of U.S. leadership and what that role should be and how effectively we're doing that role. So there are 10 goals that seem to be shared across party lines. They are inflation, immigration, economy, affordability, trade deficit, older adults, education, American pride, strengthening democracy, and world peace, with some pretty clear views shared by both parties on how those numbers need to improve. So let's pay attention. Let's see if they do improve. If our party leaders, if our government is going to do what they say they're going to do. If they're going to put their money where their mouth is. Stay tuned, like and follow this channel for the next episode, which will be the baseline report card. We just got a new government installed. Where are they starting from on all of these measures? Then we'll do a deep dive on each one of these priorities, and every quarter we'll kind of take our temperature. We'll do a progress report. We'll see how each of those statistics has changed. Are things going in the right direction or the wrong direction, or not changing at all? Follow us on YouTube at Answer the Question TV. You can also find us on TikTok at answerthequestion.tv or Instagram at answerthequestion.tv. Following the whole TikTok drama, we also set up a Blue Sky account at Answer the Question TV. So follow us on one of those platforms to check in later and see how the government's doing.